We're gonna do something different today. We're just not gonna tell any lies about modular. We're just gonna be completely candid about how difficult it is, how exciting it is, and how challenging it is. And to do that, just I'm gonna do a quick discussion of the project that we're presently working on with most of the folks sitting on this panel right now, which is the world's tallest modular hotel in Manhattan at 8426 Avenue, a Marriott AC. And I'll quickly kind of take you through that as sort of a good example of a prototypical volumetric steel modular project. But what's going to be, I think, very compelling, and we want all of your questions today too, is just going down the line. What we've assembled today is basically a series of each variant of folks who are engaged in the modular space, but none of us are manufacturers, meaning we're not selling boxes. We don't have any financial incentive here other than we believe in this ideologically, but we're not engaged in it from a practical standpoint. So from my side, my name's Danny. I'm an architect at a firm in Manhattan. We do mostly hospitality, and a good deal of our work is volumetric high-rise modular, including the project you'll see. Jennifer Abu-Zaid is from Global Design Strategies at Marriott. She has been involved from the Marriott initiative, the modular initiative, since the very beginning. And in terms of the programming and the process of modular, she is one of the most knowledgeable folks in the industry. To her left is Tim Ozeki, a friend and a client who I've worked with for a number of years. In addition to the project you'll see in a moment, Tim is a developer who's built 130?
50, who's counting?
A couple of hotels in his career, and he has just made the decision to, working with our firm, to do what will be the second tallest modular hotel in the world in Brooklyn, and he'll talk a bit about the decision to make that choice and to take that leap.
But the tallest Hilton modular.
That's correct. It will be the single tallest Hilton
you
in the world.
Yes, because we love you so much.
Hand delivered. Sorry.
And Sanat Patel is the CEO and co-founder of AVANA Capital. In addition to being one of the kind of first private equity firms to get out in front of modular lending on a very significant Marriott project in California, he's also the firm that is financing the project you'll see in a moment at 6th Avenue and looking at a number of others, so fast becoming one of the experts in modular financing. And Dave Walsh, Senior Director from a project management, from a technical standpoint, from an engineering standpoint, this is the person who's been looking at how do you crack the schedule issue with the rate of time it takes to build a hotel and thinking about modular as a solution for frankly going on about 11 years now. This has been an aspect of your portfolio. And so Jennifer and Dave in particular are from the Marriott side, the two kind of critical voices who are advancing it from the brand side. So having said that, let me quickly take you through, for those who are not familiar with the building, I'm gonna go kind of quick because I want to get to a discussion, but this you will see happening in Manhattan in a couple of months. We're bringing the modules back from Poland in November, December. We'll be stacking in Q1 of next year. It's a 400-foot tall Marriott AC. And generally speaking, I showed this rendering here, just to say when you look at it, you won't know it's a modular tower, which is really important to us. This is a building with the cast-in-place podium below, and then basically everything above the amenity floor becomes modular. So from a programmatic standpoint, it's a good candidate for modular, meaning you do the wacky spaces you can in a cast and built way, and then the repeatable spaces you are rigorously focused on manufacturing. This methodology of modular works in the sense that as you stack the modules, a scaffolding will follow on the facade of the building, meaning they're bolted at the face. That's a good opportunity in some cases because it allows you to validate your waterproofing and your fire stopping. So it's a bit of a slower way because there's other modular methodologies where the facades fully come on. In our case, the facades come on from a waterproofing standpoint, but then the joints get amended on site. From a plan standpoint, you can see the building is extremely symmetrical. What you see in red, we build in Manhattan. So in this case, we're building our fire stairs and our elevator in a sliver of hallway made of concrete. Then everything on either side, including the hallways, come attached to each module. So if you look here at that one module, if you look a bit closer, you'll see each module comes with its own sleeping quarters as well as its adjacent corridor. And that's really critical because one of the biggest selling points and the reason to think about this is all of the FF&E and the ID, all of the materials inside of the rooms, they are unaffected. They leave the factory with the door locked, and that door remains locked. The only person to open that door really should be the person connecting the fire alarm, hanging the TV, and making the bed, and that's it. You can see all the mechanical shafts get pulled to the corridor. So all MEP, all electrical, all plumbing connections happen from the corridor, meaning people with messy boots take the elevator up, they do their work, and then they get off site. They never get access to the room. And that's kind of prototypically what you want to try and accomplish in a modular building. We deployed a whole host of technology and different kinds of VR to help do as much costing as possible. Because as you'll hear from everyone, one of the critical opportunities with modular is the fact that you can do much of your analysis of the modular portion of your budget much early in the life cycle of a project, which is one of the critical value adds. And these are our prototypes. These are the 2 keys we built last November in anticipation of going into full fabrication. And as you can see, these are far more than a visual mock-up. It's a full performance mock-up, full facade, full MEP, full HVAC, everything's built. Facades are on the building. That's what it was supposed to look like in the computer, and that's what it looks like in real life. As I say, fully plumbed, functioning. It could be the first of the 2 mods, should we want it to be that. And so we went into fabrication, I think, about 6 months ago. We're still moving ahead. As I said, we've got the first 12 coming off the line, I think actually this week. I'll be in Poland week after next. And we're bringing all 168 modules back at the end of the year to be stored at the port of Red Hook. 8 will be delivered each day to be stacked into place. So that's the project as it exists today. So, and that's the factory in Krakow. So they stack on top of each other. There's many of them. They're all on the floor at the same time. And yeah, so that's that project, right? So it's big, tall, volumetric steel. And we'll talk a little bit about the difference between volumetric and some of the wood options. So having said all that, I'm going to kind of open the floor. I'm going to start, Sanat, with you for a minute, because these projects are very fun to design, but they're very sad to build when no one pays for them. So tell us a little bit about the decision, because there are not many of you in the space right now who are doing what you're doing. Tell us about the decision to say, you know, we're putting the money down. Why are we comfortable doing this?
I think you have to view it as a manufacturing process. And in manufacturing, you have a controlled environment. You have raw materials that are delivered on site, case goods and everything. And then you have a finished product that comes off. So you have less chance of change orders in the future coming into play. You've got less chance of we have better chance of work quality, being that in a controlled environment, they're manufactured. The same guy that's going to do the drywall on one unit does on the second unit, and so on and so forth. Whereas on a stick build or a conventional site, you have one guy doing the drywall on this unit, one guy doing it in the next unit, and who knows if they're going to do the same thing. The workmanship, you can see the quality of it. So that's on the manufacturing side. I think from a finance side of it, you have to understand the risks when you do modular manufacturing, because in a conventional build, all your work is being done on site. In a modular manufacturing situation, you've got a modular construction, you've got your case goods and your FF&E orders happen well before you go into production, because they need to be delivered at the manufacturing facility so they can go into the units. Number 2, you've got work going on at the site to get the site ready for delivery of those units, and making sure that the site plan, all of that is all ready, such that when the units come, they get stacked. And number 3, you've got manufacturing happening of the modular units happening at the factory, wherever that may be it in the same state or 500 miles away. So you've got, as a lending side of it, you have less control because you've got these 3 different aspects going at the same time. And then layer in the risk of when the units are manufactured and finished, they're being transported over to the site where they're going to be staged and ready. In a perfect world, the day they come off the manufacturing line, they get shipped over to the site. The site has a staging area where, as you said, they get stacked onto the site. Never works that way. I don't think there's anything perfect world in construction anyway. So you've got to manage those risks. How we got comfortable is really peeling the layers of the onion on each risk and saying, how do we get comfortable? How do we protect ourselves from insurance? Who are the partners we're dealing with from the modular manufacturer? Does the brand have an understanding of what the risks are? How do they understand that? Are we susceptible to change as it relates to quality of workmanship and things like that? These are the risks that we got comfortable with, and that's how we de-risk the project. I'd encourage any lender here, if there's other lenders here, to sit down with me, and I can tell you this is what we did, because the more people that come into this space, the better this will become more mainstream. And that's really where this needs to go.
Thanks, Nat. So Dave, from your point of view, you guys didn't begin saying Marriott is going to start doing modular. You arrived at this a little more organically. Can you talk a bit about what was the turning point for you, or the discovery moment?
Sure. Seems like I've been probably talking about this for 5+ years, but the labor, getting labor to the sites, watching our best franchisees struggle to get projects open. We saw our timelines go from 10, 12 months for a 100-room, greenfield site wood frame to now, as of last week, almost 20 months on average across the United States. So back when we started the initiative 5, 6 years ago, and even it's probably way before that, it was what can we do to help our owners kind of digest this labor challenge, which all the forecasts say was just not going to get better, right? I think today's rate from McKinsey is like we're losing 2 workers for every 1 that's coming in through retirement. So when we dove in, we looked at what's already out there, and quite honestly, we had a lot of apprehension about full volumetric. We had already been playing in the bathroom pod world and very, very comfortable with bathroom pod solutions. So for our SurePod friends, yes, I'm very supportive of, and we are still today very, very supportive of bathroom pods. If you can't do a modular project, you absolutely need to do your bathrooms with pods. But as we dove in, we quickly found an industry that was very fractured. Especially here in the States. When we looked outside globally, even though this wasn't really a global program when we first launched it, we found a lot of mom and pops, a lot of very small client bases, a lot of very geographically restricted, approaches to the solutions that were even available, and then a wide range of quality levels, and clearly nothing, appreciative to accommodate some of the hotels you're seeing today. So, we set out on a whole education program about teaching everybody about hospitality. Whoever raised their hand, what does that really mean? How does it impact their factories? Yes, you do need to go get somebody that can hang wall vinyl, because we do wall vinyl in hospitality. And that had an impact on a couple of our first vendors. So, those are those aha moments that I think we're well beyond now, and hopefully showing folks that there is a lot of benefits to it. You just got to find that right partnership.
So Jennifer, from your point of view, you spend a lot of time talking to people who raise their hands saying, I can make modules, you have a huge pipeline, send me all your developers. How do you deal with that issue where at this point you need to send your developers to an environment where they're going to get services and modules delivered to a quality that they expect when you don't have control over the factories at this point in time? How are you managing that process?
Well, I mean, when we started a few years ago, as Dave mentioned, we had a number of manufacturers that sort of raised their hand and said they wanted to work with us. We spent about a year, quite frankly, working through our brands. We spent time with them building out entire models, kind of going through that entire process. There really had to be a very serious, very strict vetting process for us. We work with well over 1,000 ownership groups. For us, for Marriott, to put their name behind a company, whether it's a vendor selling soap or it's building an entire guest room or a bathroom, we need to be absolutely sure that that particular partner is going to do more than just sell a box. And that is really a mindset that I think had been very prevalent in the industry prior to us coming in. We are very much a relationship-driven company. We need our partners to basically handle a relationship same as we would from beginning to end. That project is going to be successful from basically the day it is approved through the day it is opened. So it was very important for us to pick the right partners and, quite frankly, to help grow them, to explain the world of hospitality to them. And quite frankly, we had to learn the world of manufacturing and how to knit these two together, because they are very different worlds, and we had a lot to learn from each other. In terms of developers and owners and everybody coming to us, we have recommended the companies that we've been working with, but also owners have gone out and found other companies out there, and we continue to work with them to help educate them and bring them along in the process. I would love to have 200 factories up here right now if I could just snap my fingers. I mean, that's just to handle Marriott's pipeline alone. Hilton is the same, IHG has similar. We literally would need hundreds of factories to build the current pipelines of all of our firms. So the more manufacturers we can get into this space, the happier everyone will be, the more this ecosystem can be created. I would say since we began this, we had really just a handful of firms that were out there and, quite frankly, able to build to the quality level that we would expect. And now, a few years in, we're starting to see the next generation of manufacturers, very tech-driven, very savvy about how to use either software, different technologies, whether it's VR or it's things in terms of the production process. And so we're really starting to see this evolve. And it's been pretty neat to see how quickly now in the last few years this has really changed.
Now, in terms of this market growing, the way in which it happens is that, Marriott supports manufacturers and they get their acts together and the finance community shows up, but ultimately it's our clients who have to take the risk to do this. And so, Tim, as you sit there, you come to my office and you say, I want to build a hotel. You say, I've heard of Modular. You say, is it cheaper? I say no. And then you still decide to move forward with the modular tower. So if it's not this cheaper magical solution, what in your mind allowed you after your due diligence to make this decision? What did that thinking look like?
Danny, we've studied modular now for a lot of years. And I think currently we're really focused on markets that have higher barriers to entry, that have logistic issues, that have very lack of skilled labor. So on our Brooklyn project, this is a site that is, if you can imagine this, 33 feet wide, 100 feet deep, and we're going 25 stories tall. So this is truly, I say this to you all the time, and I mean it seriously, this is when you want to make sure our structural engineer graduated at the top of his class, not at the bottom. So all that said, we've sliced and diced this every which way. We've looked at it, with multiple contractors just doing a conventional ground-up construction. We've looked at modular. We've looked at different forms of modular. I think net at the end of the day, modular is going to cost us a small premium, but it's also going to give us quality that's second to none. You're not going to get this kind of precision quality, in the field. It's just not going to happen. We have 33-foot wide sites, so we have a logistics issue. There's no laydown area. So, where we would even put all these materials is a huge issue for us. Combined with then I look at the safety factor that we've talked about. The guest room portion of a hotel typically going to represent 70 to 80% of the total construction cost. When we can get a manufacturer that will early on guarantee us not only a precision product, but absolute cost certainty, that helps us, really get comfortable with that. It helps the lender get comfortable with it. It really insulates us from, the inevitable change orders that come in all projects. I look at a project, if you got 3% or less change orders, it's a great project. 5% and up starts becoming questionable. This really is going to help, I think, mitigate change order exposure to us. So, and I think beyond that, as long as, this is an exact science. It really is. This is a very exacting, you're building at shop drawing levels. So everything is exactly figured out. I think, again, that just gives us the continuity that is necessary to make these really worthwhile. Putting all of that technology together and all of the guys that graduated at the top of their class, Danny, we believe that it will also, in our Brooklyn project, probably save us 6 months to speed the delivery. So that's another important factor. There's a cost of money involved in that, albeit you're putting out a big slug of front-end dollars earlier than you might when you're putting deposits out for the modular manufacturers. But when you can still get the cash registered around 6 months earlier on a project like that, that's very meaningful. It really helps your soft costs and, again, get the revenue flowing.
And just to add to
please.
Tim's point, I think the ability of speed to market, to open, it supports a developer's business model, which is, let me build it, let me stabilize it, let me get the cash flow I'm supposed to get, and then recapture some of that equity to go on to the next project. So modular construction offers you that ability and takes out the risks, the uncontrollable risks such as weather, such as labor issues, or some of the labor issues in a market and or competition in a market. So the speed to market gets you there faster. You're able to get stabilized and able to recycle your business model a lot sooner. And I think that's something that should be figured in when you look at a cost comparison that's premium today, but you're open faster. That premium can then be offset through profits, which I think at the end of the day, that's what we're all trying to do anyway.
Absolutely, as I agree. So again, it's really finding what I'll call the A-team that gets it, that's embraced it, because there is a tremendous amount of front end, I'll call it additional time and brain cells that have to be killed in order to get there. But I think when you do that and you invest that time, the end result is much more favorable.
Yeah, and I'll speak to the dead brain cells because that tends to fall to us. And I think you're hearing all these wonderful positives, right? Get open sooner, higher quality, revenue starts sooner, cost of money. But then given what you've just heard, then there should be nothing but modular projects, right? So the market today doesn't support the value proposition you've heard from the panel, so that's a problem, right? The reason is it's that we don't know how to do it yet. And what I mean to say is the A&E community, that in order to deliver to them the documents to get what they want, in other words, for Tim to have cost certainty, he needs to have shop drawing level documents of a building that would be brought back to the early part of DD. So those of you who do buildings, you've got SD, DD, and CDs, right? You have to get not just CD level documents, but fabrication drawings. So like you're making a car. So full shop drawing fabrication documentation has to get plucked up from the end of CDs for your guest rooms and then get brought back to the beginning of DD. That's a big hill to climb. It's not something that we've all been taught to do yet. And so the A&E community has a whole lot of work to do on our side to be able to accommodate the needs that these guys have, because if that doesn't work out, all that wonderful change order mitigation goes out the window because the documents aren't good enough, the savings doesn't happen in manufacturing, you end up getting change orders. So I think there's some structural issues on our side, candidly, that the architecture engineering community needs to elevate their game and understand how to sort of flip the teams on their side. And we're getting there. Not fast enough, but we're getting there. And just to be clear, for the wood frame, more prototypical modular projects, that really represents about 80% of the pipeline, right? That stuff is pretty much well baked, and developers can really, I mean, you've gotten to the point where it's not quite, I'll take that one, but I mean, that's the goal, right?
That's where we want to get to.
That's what your head
we're
is.
still on phase
like
one,
order
but we
your
started
hotel on Amazon.
Right?
Why can't you do it?
Yeah. I mean, that was the first step we took when we went to the modular manufacturers. We said, what can we do to help, jumpstart this? And they said, bring certainty. Well, what is certainty?
Yeah.
So we looked at, out of the 10 brands that Jennifer and I support, we looked at 5 of them. Instantly, we know that they can be DOT friendly. They hit the road. They check the box on being modular friendly. So what could we produce to allow Tim, if Tim was going to go back into the wood frame world, start producing courtyards, snap of a finger. We produced a very basic, elementary, modular set of plans that locks in the dimensions of the inside of the room and defines the guideline set of documents for that 100-room hotel. And it tweaks it just a little bit outside of the way we originally designed it to make it more modular friendly, so around the corridors and that kind of thing. So I say that's phase one because those have been out for a while. We've got the education started in the A&E community. We got the manufacturers kind of grabbing them and start building them. Now they just need the Tims of the world to walk in the door and say, no, I just want that. Because if the owners in the group here can have that mindset that the box is the box, and I know we're not selling boxes, we're selling, precision here. But if you can kind of segment the boxes itself, that's what the industry needs from us, is that certainty that if somebody walks in and is building a 4 or 5 story wood frame from California to Maine, that box is the same, literally the same structure. Why is that important? Because for every 2 inches of dimensional adjustment, the structural calculations have to start all over again. His shop drawings have to be redone all over again. And that's the kind of stuff we want. Just bring it off the shelf. This is what I want. I want a box A, B, C, D, that kind of thing. And the architects still have the flexibility to build that hotel with the room mix that we all need from a hospitality and from a market perspective. but the solution is there. And you can be as creative as you want on the exterior. You can still be as creative as you need on the facilities program, for your specific markets. But if we can ultimately get our brands and the hospitality into thinking that way, that's the deliverable that gets the manufacturers excited. They start thinking about a brand. Ooh, I know that. I can pull it off the shelf. And yes, I can do any finishes I want on the inside, but my box is what guides that speed of completion of design.
And so just so folks are clear, so the 4/1, the 4 stories of wood over 1 podium of concrete, that's the kind of the meat and potatoes greenfield site that Marriott's done a great job of getting to a commodified level almost, where you can go in and pick a property that you want. As soon as you exceed that in height, you move into the steel, the volumetric structural steel game, which is not yet at a point where it is so commodified because, frankly, seismic and wind and changes in the mechanical deductions and or the site geometries will require some amendments to the design, but there still is a desire to try and, whether it's through parametrics or it's through developing systems with multiple manufacturers, that you can still systematize what we're doing. So for example, the project I showed you at 6th Avenue that's being manufactured today, there's a tremendous amount, let's say, with the way in which we're dealing with the facades, dealing with the structural steel, dealing with the fire rating that's coming directly over to the Brooklyn project. So there still is institutional knowledge. It's just a little, frankly, less commodified than the greenfield stuff.
Sure.
Let's talk a little bit, I'm gonna jump over to you for a minute. I talk to folks, they come to my office, they say, I want to do a modular project, and they say, I have to put all this money up front, the cash flow is so different, the lending community, no banks will lend on this. And what they always say to me is, I don't want there to be a stigma on my building, so when come resale time, I'm not going to be able to flip the building because it's modular and therefore it's somehow inferior. What do I say to those developers so they won't leave my office?
I would tell you this project that's on the screen right now, the Hawthorne, if you walked into that room, you would be hard-pressed to find some defects in that room. More importantly, I think the guest experience in a modular manufactured room is better from a sound quality perspective. If you look at TripAdvisor, the reviews, most of it's too noisy or something like that. In a modular manufactured room, you have a buffer of sound with the fact that you have a gap between each room, above, below, on the sides, and everywhere. So that is important. I think to the point you made from a financing side of it, when you the value of that room is going to be the revenue generate, the rate you're able to charge. Well, if you're able to give a better quality experience, most people will pay for that quality, and that will translate into your bottom line. From that perspective, I think it's easier. It's easy from a finance side of it. It's a lot better. The other part of modular you have to consider is that, if you have to renovate the room or whatever, you've got parts you can do within it. So if the brand changes some standards or things like that, then you can accommodate that. But one thing on the modular side you have to remember, if you're ordering your case goods or whatever at the front end, when you're manufacturing the units, if the brand goes through a brand revision, they're more easier to work with because you've pre-ordered everything. It's not like you can change what that sofa is going to be done in that room. So Jennifer and Dave and their group overall, and even other brands, will work with you in reference to that. So from a finance side of it, I think it's a lot easier to kind of compartmentalize each risk and identify what the benefit of modular is. That's what we've done in our process in terms of understanding this, is that we feel with modular you get longevity, you get a better value in the long term. And the fact, as Tim said, the speed to market, that determines a lot of the value on a modular construction side of it.
Yeah, and I think you've got actually especially in wood frame modular, where it's much more susceptible to weather. Now you've got something that's built in a controlled environment.
Yes.
Wood doesn't love water. Mm-hmm. So let's see how long we can take building this in the stick frame. Right. And let's see how much OSB and plywood we're going to replace and what's concealed and we don't know about. Mm-hmm. I think from an overall structural box, you've got a box that is built way stronger. You've got walls, floors, ceilings for every box. So you've got double walls, double floors and ceilings. And it's going to be built structurally sound to go across the road. You're not doing that if you're stick building it. So you've got something that's really a bulletproof box.
Back to what Danny was saying, should the lenders be concerned about the final product, or
No.
and not the lenders, the
resale.
owners,
The next
resale
buyer.
value, the next buyer? How do you guys look at a modular
Because
hotel?
my clients say that
Yeah.
to me. I've got clients who are on the fence and they say, I don't want to be stuck with a
And
stigma.
this is a quiz because you answered it one way that I loved a couple months ago, so I want to make sure you haven't changed.
I'll tell you that the project that we did in Hawthorne,
Okay.
that developers had offers on the property, and he's not told them they've made modular, and they're like, they care about the revenue stream.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of whether it was manufactured modular or not, because if I took you to two buildings, one that was stick built and one that was modular built, you would be hard pressed to know the difference unless you spent the night and the sound quality. That's the difference.
Yeah.
So, and from a lending perspective, no, I don't. I really don't care, because I'm driving
Right.
lending based on
Right.
revenue and profitability.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say, just to be candid about pros and cons, though, you do, I mean, and frankly, when you flip a hotel and change a brand, it is not often that you want to blow out all the walls and change the dimensions, because generally speaking, a structural bay will, generally speaking, define the width of the room. You are, I will say, limited in modular with respect to the fact that those partition walls are actually the demising walls that hold up the building. So you're not able to blow out the entire building and make an office building. It's true. I don't know many residence inns that have become great Class A office buildings, for that matter, right? So I think for the most part, a demising wall stays where it is, but it is fair to mention that in modular, that's not just the module structure, it's the building structure as well. Let's talk a little bit about the kind of landscape right now, because we're in an interesting point in time where everyone's excited about modular, not everyone's doing modular, and that means the lending community is not, I mean, it's not sitting here, but you're on a lot of these panels because there isn't enough of you out here, right?
This is like the band getting back together.
Yeah, the traveling wheelbarrows. But
That's what you called us earlier.
my point is that from a municipal standpoint, you have to take these things, maybe made in America or made outside of America, and get them DOB approved in various different cities. Let's talk a little bit about where the industry is right now, because at the end of the day, we need developers, lenders, architects, brands, and city officials to be on the same page to make this frictionless, which today it is not frictionless, right? If I were to say that this has been, I mean, we were just talking about our 6th Avenue project, it's been a challenge, right? There's like different hiccups along the way that we have to work through because we're at the tip of the spear at the moment. Where do you guys see, or maybe I'll put it to you, Jennifer, what do we need to happen in the next couple of years to make this more frictionless? What are the next steps?
Well, I think, first thing, from a regulatory standpoint and building code standpoint, I think we all know that we have, 50 different states, 50 different ideas on different things. Many of the states do have modular programs, but I think it's still a fairly wide array of sophistication out there or ability to really consistently know how to deal with these types of projects. So I think, there is a long way to go with working with, getting some of the codes changed, getting the municipalities much more educated, and quite frankly, from a process standpoint, how do we sort of streamline that? As I mentioned earlier, we had to really learn the world of manufacturing. And this is really, in terms of, if you look at all the different industries, everything that you buy in life pretty much is manufactured somewhere. This is the only industry that literally over the last number of decades has had almost no technology applied to it, no change in how we build something, whether it's a student housing project, it's a hotel, it's whatever. We keep doing the same thing. We keep redesigning a building, a bathroom, whatever, from scratch. And really, you look at even what's on the screen here, 300 plus rooms. The rooms really, we're not changing shape. It's just how do we outfit that room. But how do we basically, instead of redoing a project over and over again and losing a lot of valuable time and chewed up in different design processes, how do we take this process and streamline it down to the point where we can literally go from a design, like you said, all the way down to shop drawing level that's literally then sent into manufacturing. And that really requires not only a lot on the part of the architectural community, it requires a lot on everybody's side. It is a radically different approach, timeline, much more accelerated timeline, accelerated decision making. Because think about it, if I'm looking at this Chapel Hill property, you're gonna build 200 rooms. I need 200 rooms worth of FF&E. I need all those decisions made well in advance, much more than you're traditionally comfortable with. So you got to be willing to like back the schedule up, be willing to make your decisions, stick with those decisions so that product can get to a factory. This is just like building a car. There's really no difference. We've just got to get to sort of that elevated point in time, just like the automotive industry's had the ability to over decades to apply technology, to keep retooling factories to bring out every last bit of efficiency and have everything sort of just in time. Very similar approach. So it's really that entire ecosystem that we're really kind of struggling at the very beginning stages of trying to get to. And then I think ultimately, and we've actually started talking about this a lot in the last year, for us as Marriott and even with our owners, how do we get from just doing one project here in Chapel Hill, one project in New York, one project in California? We need to be able to get to a point where we can sort of figure out how to aggregate or corral demand to a point to put that into a factory environment. Factories don't open to just do one project and then close up for a month or two and then start back up, pull people. We need to keep factories running constantly. So if I have 1,000 different owners with 1,000 different projects or 4,000 projects, how do I figure that out over all different timelines? So I think we have a ways to go to figure out sort of the calculus, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, because if you go to any of these factories, specifically domestic ones, it sounds like high-tech modular, but it's really just construction gone indoors. I mean, there's no robots, there's very little in terms of process engineering, and a lot of that technology has not really made its way to the factories quite yet. There's a few places, Singapore, a little bit in Tokyo, that has some of that in terms of manufactured housing. But in America at this point, what we've done is we've coalesced the work, put it under a roof, we've made the assembly line, and we've tried to leverage that opportunity, but we still have a huge ways to go in terms of bringing, say, robotics into the process at this point. We're still, it's exciting, but it's really, really day one at this point. I want to talk a little bit about municipal authorities too, because I think people are always concerned about how do you get an approval. Just to kind of prime the question, I'll say, just so folks know, in some cities like New York, they have established things like the OTCR, the Office of Technical Certification, whereby you can have an off-site inspector hired by the ownership sent out to, in our case, Krakow, Poland, and they're doing special inspections in the field. So you are, in fact, DOB approved for the module prior to going through customs, and that's a system that's established in New York, and it's a process that is potentially repeatable. But what do we need to do to get the cities to support us? Dave, I'll put this to you. How do we think about the next step in the conversation?
Well, we need some leadership in that space, honestly.
Yeah.
Jennifer and I have been to a couple conversations with the New York City development, urban housing and development communities. When Amazon looked like they were going to be landing in New York City, that crush of housing really scared them. They were already under serviced housing model. So in some of the conversations, unfortunately they stole our nickname before we could think of it, but they called themselves the Mod Squad. And what they were doing, a couple guys on their team, is they were going around to listening to us talk and listening to other folks talk to try to build up their case internally in the city. We need folks like that, that the city, that the leadership in the cities see as this is what we need to do to solve a problem, or at least to dip the toes in and be brave enough to go have the conversation and bring guys like those guys back, universally together. That's what we're kind of pushing the Modular Building Institute to become kind of that force, and they've stepped up in the last couple of years. We like to see that happen more and more. But honestly, as scary as this is and as early as it is in its infancy, we haven't had any real major issues. Mm-hmm. As long as you're putting together the right team, the right mindset from an owner who's, really into the project process, an architect that may not have the experience but wants to learn, structural engineers, same kind of situation. We've seen the switch go off from the it'll never work to I guess I better find out how it works, over the last 3 years, which has been exciting. Now that next phase is how do they, in their markets, really turn on the HJs to understand this a little bit better. But other than some, unique one-off custom solutions to help keep them happy and keep things moving, we haven't run into
That's great.
wholehearted. issues.
Because one of the things that's kind of exciting for those who are interested in this sort of space, if you want to be pioneering, is that this industry that you're describing is actually out in front of most city agencies. It's out in front of UL. It's out in front of ASTM. There's a certain amount of already existing approvals for certain assemblies, but a lot of the stuff is really new. And so thank goodness there's been a lot of testing that's gone on already with various groups, but that developers and owners and the brand also need to get kind of excited about the fact that you're going to have to figure out some solutions and do a lot of education with sort of local agencies to help them understand what kind of special police escort do I require? What is the turning radius of the vehicle? How is that going to be working and so forth? So it's a very interesting conversation to be in because you get to be setting policy. There's a whole other conversation about the fact that we have double wall conditions in our hotels, right? There's 2 walls or individual 2 shoe boxes sit next to each other. Well, you could make the argument that I've got a 12-inch now wall assembly, what used to be a 6-inch wall assembly. Shouldn't I get some credit back from the city if they believe that this is the future? And so even those policy conversations are just now underfoot and still need to be developed.
I think if I can touch on that
Please.
too, Danny, I think in a lot of states now too, and I'll speak to California, where we also have 3 other projects, 1 in San Jose, 2 in Burbank, that are being set up as modular projects. California is truly like another country. I'm not sure who's here from California, but I mean, the entitlement process is mind-numbing, and I think, one thing that is near and dear to them is environmental. So you go through these exhaustive EIR studies that take a year or 16 months and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you get through all that. But I think as I'm going through that right now, ears perked up when all of a sudden, this was going to be an off-site manufacturer. So the environmental impact, it's much more efficient. There's less waste. There's less noise pollution, dust, dirt, construction pollution on site. So that's another, something that's very beneficial to a lot of these cities.
Yeah, you tell a fire marshal that he doesn't have any cardboard to worry about, burning in an open box anymore, and that the waste factor, went from 10 to 12% on an average project down to 1% on a modular. County architectural review boards love that.
Environmentally very friendly. So.
Absolutely.
I think we're certainly not in infant phases. We're in some phase of gestation here, and I don't know when that's when it's fully matured, but we've got a ways to go. I think there's an educational process too that's important to know. In the contractor world.
Yeah.
Because there's contractors that just don't understand this, don't get it. You really got to partner with somebody that embraces it, understands it. But there's a fear factor there. There's a fear factor down to the subcontractor level too.
For sure.
Because they don't know what they're getting into. Bottom line is you still need all of your trades.
Yeah.
You just need them on site for a lot less work. I explain to everybody, guys, it's like hooking up a big dishwasher. It's just a whole room.
Yeah.
You're going to connect power and HVAC and some plumbing. But you've got to get the education to be understood so that you get the right pricing then. On the subcontractor GC side.
We struggled with that because, it's a funny thing, it's a documentation issue. When we draw a building, we show the pipe going all the way up, right? But it turns out that the piping is coming already into the module, right? So the subcontractor who's bidding the job has a very specific scope, greatly reduced from his or her traditional scope. And even if you tell it to him and you redline it and you put in a memo together, the bids still come back totally wacky. First they bid the whole scope, then they bid the appropriate scope, but charge like it's the whole scope. It's a real process to get the subcontractor community to kind of wrap their heads around. Even though you're saying, hey, look, guys, all you got to do is get it from here to here. Still is
it's not mainstream. It's the fear of the unknown.
Yeah, and
so they're sandbagging numbers yet. Until they get comfortable with it. So.
And it's led to a lot of scoping conversations, obviously.
A lot of scoping.
So one of the more recent scoping conversations, and we actually have a modular manufacturer. Until it's successful, I'll leave the name out of the conversation. But he's literally taking podium and up. So what does that mean? It means he's going to take on all the finishes in the corridor. He's going to button up the entire corridor. He's going to do the corridor carpet. He's going to own it all the way to the top, including poking through the podium, all the mechanicals that necessarily need to tie into the lower level. They did a little bit of redesign, but the exterior of the building goes back to the GC, completely GC controlled, including mate line work and final roof. So from a scoping perspective, it helped him get over that subcontractor frustration. They said, you're just going to get all the pipes delivered, and low voltage guy is somebody that I run anyway, so I can feed it up my way and get it to my IDFs and get it down my hallway, and I'll worry about that. So low voltage was probably about the biggest hiccup.
But what's interesting is that there isn't even AIA contracts yet to support the relationship that's now
Yes,
evolving.
exactly.
Like, we're not even there yet. I mean, think
Yeah.
about that. Like, the B101 and the A101 doesn't really help the fact that you've
Right.
got a GC
just
and a
a lot of
manufacturer. Who's the contract with? Is the owner going to sign a contract with the manufacturer, or do you want the manufacturer under the GC and have all of them under one umbrella? I mean, I have an opinion on that, but there isn't necessarily the right way to do it quite yet, and there's assets and liabilities with each. I mean, Tim, you can say a little bit, maybe, Tim, you can.
I think on the financing side of it, having one contract with the GC, with the manufacturer, makes life a lot easier. I'm dealing with one party. Can you do it both ways? Yes, because the manufacturer is really doing a supply agreement of the product. He or she is then delivering the units to the GC, who then, if the GC is not qualified to set the units, it's a separate contract with that as well. So you have to understand those nuances. And if you can, we're still, as you said, we're in phase one, to your point.
Right.
We're pioneering as we go along, but every phase we learn better what to do next time. So every project that comes out of the ground that's modular, we take all the learnings from there, we apply to the next one. So down the road, I think if we sit 2-3 years down the road, this is going to become more mainstream, and it's going to have all the technology. It's going to have some of the city, the municipalities, all of these things come at the forefront that help the project move along much faster.
Can I add one thing?
Please.
No, so, I mean, we're up here discussing hospitality, but, as this thing continues to grow, you'd be amazed at the calls we get every single week from companies you wouldn't even imagine would be entertaining the idea of modular. Retailers, healthcare. We've covered everything with student housing, multifamily housing, affordable housing, all of these different, parts of the industry building different products, basically. We're all building boxes, no matter what you call it, a hotel, an apartment, or this or that, we're still building boxes. So I think over time now, we're starting to see a much more unified demand across many different types of companies building different products. And I think that's really going to start driving some more innovation, technology, et cetera, into the process. Because ultimately, it's not enough for Marriott or Hilton or anybody just to sit here and say, we just want it for us, for hospitality. This is really a change in how we build, period. This is how we believe it's going to go, for no other reason that we are just going to run out of labor. It's just that simple. It's that kind of math. So the more these different companies are now getting involved in the space, and we're all really starting to talk to each other and sort of figure out, are there ways to standardize, universalize certain boxes to keep manufacturing lines running? So maybe they're working on a hotel one day and they can flip to multifamily the next. That's the kind of thing that we need to be able to sort of come together on.
Because I think we can agree, and I don't think modular is the answer, the singular answer, but I think one thing we can agree on is that the way we build buildings today is dumb. And it is not efficient, and
Infuriating.
it has not innovated or improved over the last 100 years, let's say with the amount of iPhones we've had in the last 3 years, right?
Yeah.
So what's exciting about this is that it's an alternative approach. It has tons of challenges associated with it, but the amazing thing is that there are some significant players in the field who are prepared to take a risk, candidly, and get engaged. With that, I want to open the floor a little bit to questions. I mean, I've got some more, but I want to get folks involved as well. So let me see, any questions from the house in the back?
Got one down here.
Oh, Michael, you got a mic? I can't see where you are.
Hi, my name is Mark Craig. I'm here with Procord. I'm just curious, on the manufacturing side, what are the kind of low-hanging fruit, or where do you see the most immediate innovations that will come on the manufacturing side that will have the greatest immediate impact in modular?
Sorry,
I
can
didn't
you
hear
say one more? I missed the second half. Are you?
Just more simply, what are the most immediate innovations that you see coming on the manufacturing side that will have the greatest impact for modular.
I was hoping you were going to ask, what things can Procore invent to help us manage our project better?
There you go.
I'd like to talk to you after this meeting. Well, I do candidly think, Procore has done a great service to all of us in helping us manage RFIs and think about data management and paper management in a different way. I think there needs to be a deeper dive in terms of how we think about manufacturing engineering, because whether it's the advanced procurement that's required, or it's dealing with the fact that you have basically, in our project, we've got half the mods on the floor at one given time. So we have 86 baby construction projects happening, and deploying materials and resources appropriately and tracking that would be, we don't have that right now, and we need that. There's a question.
Jennifer, you mentioned this is, you got to see this like a car manufacturing process. Do you foresee robotics playing a part in the manufacturing process?
Very much so.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, like Dave mentioned earlier, when we sort of first started this process, and I think we saw most of the factories across this country in the last few years, it was all pretty much hand labor. We didn't see any kind of automation, robotics, you name it. It just really didn't exist as far as we had seen. Now what we're starting to see is, especially with the next generation companies, some level of robotics. I won't say it's 100%, like you see going down like a, BMW production line at this point. But I think there's going to be a happy medium. The companies that we've talked to that are starting to invest in robotics and that heavier technology all basically say you still need that human component in there. Where that levels out eventually, I'm not exactly sure yet, but...
Yeah, I mean, the only factory globally is Sekisui, which has a Malaysian factory and a Bangkok factory where they have full robot welding and they have the full kind of car manufacturing, but there it's very, very systematized. On our project at 6th Avenue, we have robot welding for the structural steel cages, so it does sit on a gimbal and all of the welds are done and certified that way. That's about the extent of it for the project. Beyond that, it really is a bunch of construction workers under a roof just working.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think,
Not yet.
honestly, it's like when someone says, when you're going to 3D print a house, it's like, I guess we can do that. But like right now, we're taking some incremental steps that have tremendous improvements. I think, frankly, from my point of view, beyond robotics, I think it's actually data tracking and kind of engineering logistics, bringing technology in terms of plant management would go a tremendous ways towards helping. But one last thing to say, too, is, as Jennifer pointed out, until there's enough projects to support these factories, none of them is going to put money into R&D, and if they're spending all this money on shiny brochures to get more work.
Right.
So we need there to be an actual economy of modular projects to allow for revenue to go towards R&D, which doesn't exist today. I mean, it's knuckleheads like us and Marriott and these folks who are actually underwriting a lot of the R&D, which is not really the way to do it.
Yes, she has some more.
How long do you see it taking before the A&E community gets really involved in it with a real background of knowing how to do it?
The AIA released their first kind of modular brief earlier this year, and it was pretty thin, candidly. I think, unfortunately, our community still feels like if the AIA heard Jennifer talk about, hey, it's just a bunch of boxes, they would all cringe, because it's like, oh, my value proposition goes away. You're making boxes. Who needs an architect? And I think I hope the awareness that actually our capacity to impact the project becomes much deeper, because we're engaged in fabrication drawings. In the past, I give CDs away and hope for the best, right? So the answer, I have no. I hope, hopefully soon, we keep doing this roadshow. I hope more people get excited about it, but it'll take time. Because right now, we're losing a ton of money doing this, right? Because we don't know what we're doing. It's really hard. Right? We have to get to the point where we start to cash in on some of the efficiencies that come from this process, and that will only happen with more projects.
For the two projects in New York, the one in Manhattan and the one in Brooklyn, over here.
Oh, hi.
How many qualified manufacturers are there out there that could actually manufacture the boxes for those two projects in the United States and outside the United States?
Today, or when they made their decision?
That's a good question.
Yeah, they're two different
That's a
answers.
very
When they made their decision, 0. Today, I would say there's probably 3, potentially 4, and they're all, reinventing their businesses or launching their businesses. They're making great strides, breaking down all kinds of barriers, and we look forward to many, many successful projects with all of them as soon as possible. US.
And-
Both.
Yeah.
And we even have a lot of interest from the outside wanting to come into the US. A lot of capital flowing into this space. So our phone rings off the hook pretty consistently.
There are businesses, and they're out there. I mean, you know some of them, we talked about it. We've got some in Europe, there's some in Poland, some in Malaysia, some in Finland. We've got a couple volumetric steel folks in America as well. I'd say the Europeans are a smidge ahead of the Americans at this point, but the Americans are doing good stuff. So I think it's, they all need to just get successful projects stacked, go through that process, and then things will get better.
So we have time for one more question over here.
Thanks. If you are consulting for a general contractor or speaking with a general contractor, what would you suggest they be doing over the next 5 years for their 5-year plan?
That's great.
Great question.
Great question.
So two things. I'll take this one. So we spent a lot of time in the early years going to the manufacturers. And one of the first questions I learned that was pretty important was to each of them, do you know your general contractor community? Because if we're staring and looking at a small client base and a certain efficiency range, 300-400 miles from a factory, it was amazing to me that the modular guys would only work with 1 or 2 guys. But they didn't know John, who was a bonding capacity of 50 million up the street. He's always turned his head to a modular, but they never even thought about inviting him into the factory to teach him and help him learn about maybe there's a modular opportunity if it knocks on your door, how we can partner together. So we've really challenged the modular community in that regard, and they've stepped up and they've reached out to a lot of GCs, which, oh, by the way, we're about ready to do it, as they all say. But same thing as the architectural community in the last 3 or 4 years have kind of shifted their mindset towards modular, so have the GCs. I mean, there's so much out there in the press today about lack of labor, and if they're not feeling it, then they're one of the very, very few. Yeah. So we've seen a lot of acquisitions. Our friends here from SurePod know DPR pretty well now. Yeah, I mean, the construction community is all about either learning more about it and wanting to figure out those partnerships, or quite honestly trying to get into the business.
Jennifer made a comment about it being where their phone rings off the hook with other industries that are coming into it. Mm-hmm. So you've got student housing, you've got multifamily, you've got senior care, you've got retail, you've got modularized office type of a construction. So to a GC, I would tell you, this is the wave. Maybe hospitality was the first wave or the first industry that has taken modular manufacturing and applied it for their product. But there are these other industries that where construction, the labor shortage is across the board, any of these industries. So once this becomes more mainstream according to supplying those industries, it's going to be here for a long term. So I would tell you focus on that side as well.
I think all of the progressive contractors are really now wanting to engage. And there's a huge paradigm shift that I just encountered out in California, where I'm working with a GC out there that basically said, I want your business, but I only want it if you're going to do it modular, because I don't want to deal with the labor shortage. I don't want to deal with trying to get 20 guys in the bathroom to punch out this room at the end. So
you're going to start seeing government work go that way as well. There's going to be a certain increasing percentage of off-site requirements. They're already looking at that holistically.
The Hawthorne project we did, the GC that built that came when we did lessons learned with them. They came back and said, I'd rather do a modular project any day of the week, to the point Tim just made. He validated that, and I said, wow, because if I can do more of this any day of the week.
That's a really good point, because a lot of them are fairly old companies, second-gen owners that used to be able to promise Tim, the owner, 12 months and I get you a great project. They can't seriously look at him today in the face and say I can deliver it in 12 to 14 months. Can't do it. And if they are, they're lying, and they shouldn't be in business.
I'm going to say, and one of the companies we're talking to right now that I think we would consider to be probably one of the most advanced has been a GC for the last 60 years. And as they kind of experienced that life through their history and saw all that was wrong with this industry in the market that they worked in, and also were trying to address some severe affordable housing issues, they really started to figure out this is the way we have to go. And so they've made certain, additions into their company, like buying a design firm, and they've gone from being a sole GC concern into basically a design, manufacture, and build type of firm. So it's literally a turnkey approach to, make all your decisions, walk away, we'll build everything, and then we're going to hand you the keys at the end of the day.
And that's an incredibly important
Yeah.
point, just to say that the advice to the GC is if you want to do this, you can't outsource. If you want to partner with a manufacturer and say, I'll build the site stuff, we'll bring in the pods, best of luck, but you're going to be in trouble. I think the GCs that are taking this approach to think about IPD, integrated project delivery, where they think about they are responsible for the fabrication drawings, even if it's going to the manufacturer, the GC becomes a much more critical player in the design, build, manufacturing triangle. And those GCs, and that means learning Revit. That means understanding you're going to be ingesting design drawings in BIM and translating those drawings to a factory and playing a role in that conversation. You can't just sit back and write contracts.
And to end on the finance side of it, having an integrated GC means from a lending side, I'm dealing with one party.
Yeah.
Which makes it a lot easier so I can pick up the phone if I have a hiccup to that one person.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would have described before even meeting Sanat that of the 8 modular projects I dealt with when we first launched this program, I would have described them all as failures. And they were all failures because of that lack of contract with the GC. There were owners buying and delivering, and a lot of this going on. And
we could do a whole other conversation about the contractual relationships with the different parties because it does change the paradigm, but Michael is chomping at the bit. So we're going to stop talking. And Michael, we're going to get on.
sorry.
Again, thank you guys. There's an awesome panel, and we'll just have to do Modular Spaces event sometime soon.